What were the big tech stories of 2019?
And what will we see in 2020? Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by Casa Systems, taking Australian technology to the global market. Welcome to Vertical Hold, behind the tech news, where we talk to Australia's leading technology journalists to get the stories behind the news of the week. I'm Adam Turner, and for the very last time in 2019, I'm joined by Alex Kidman, apparently the only man in Australia who thinks that gearing up for the Boxing Day test means swatting for some kind of written exam. I keep telling you, mate, cricket. It's this weird thing called sport that everyone else but you seems to enjoy.
Look, I know all about cricket. Douglas Adams wrote about it in Life, the Universe, and Everything. Genocidal species also invented the world's most boring game.
Sounds about right, actually. Now, you might not care who wins the toss at the DG, but I'm afraid to ask how upset you might be about the fact that the Doctor Who Christmas special isn't coming till New Year's. Oh, and that was the sound of Alex exploding, right, as he puts himself back together. Speaking of Christmas, we're also joined by our end-of-year special guest, Picker AU editor Lee Stark. Lee, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, guys. It's always good to be here.
So, Lee, Christmas is almost upon us, and I understand that you're shaping up to be the last man standing in Whamageddon. Alex and I are already out. We're unlucky enough to hear Wham's Last Christmas while venturing out in public. We're trapped in Whamhalla, but Lee, what's your secret to success?
I try to listen to only jazz, and I find that it puts me out of touch with everyone but really old people.
That's definitely the way to do it. I can't argue with a strategy like that.
So it's been a big year in tech, and look, we could talk through every single headline or scream them at you super, super loud, but that would take ages. You'd be here forever. So instead, we want to look at some of the really big picture issues of the year. And one of the bigger ones that's still rolling out now, is 5G. This year was meant to be the year of 5G. Optus kind of kickstarted it by saying back in January, in fact, hey, we've launched 5G, although their conception of launch was a little bit odd.
Yeah, launch was really, we've just tried to pip the others to get the headlines and maybe one person can get it. So stand back, everybody. It really has been a crazy race to see who can claim 5G honours, and it's slowly creeping out, and they're taking different approaches to it that kind of makes it hard to compare apples with apples. But Lee, who do you think's got the upper hand here? How do you think it's playing out?
I don't know if anyone has the upper hand, to be honest. I mean, like on the one side, Optus's approach for taking it from a broadband sense actually kind of does make a lot of sense. It's an easier way to, I guess, connect people with the idea that 5G is fast, even though the 5G speeds we're getting aren't dramatically faster than 4G. On the other side, Telstra did kind of kick off with 5G phones before everyone else, and they had a few, and even though you couldn't really hit 5G speeds outside of Glebe or the Gold Coast, I don't know. I don't think anyone's really won 5G at the moment. They've all just said we have 5G. It doesn't quite get there. We haven't seen a proper use case for 5G, and I generally think that's a lot of the problem.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk around it. As you say, Telstra kind of came in first with devices. That's sort of equalised now. And I guess 2020 is where we presumably will see a lot better 5G coverage, but also devices that make more sense of it, devices that are more affordable, maybe even some use cases. As of course, as we discussed, I think it was just last week, we'll see 5G Olympics for that matter. Although whether that's necessary is a matter that's open to some technical debate, and that involves that whole sports thing again. I don't get it.
Well, the Olympic thing is a jerk move. It's still, I think, Optus is going to get more cut through with people talking about it as a home broadband replacement because of the shit show that is the NBN. Because there are so many people that when we get to the end of the NBN rollout and Fletcher hires an aircraft carrier and stands there and says mission accomplished, there will still be thousands and thousands of homes in no man's land. So I think what Optus is doing is going to reach more people rather than Telstra saying, oh, we're going to make your mobile phone a bit faster. And people are going, well, I already watched Netflix on the train. What more do you want?
You're also making the assumption that 5G sports is going to work because Optus's sports record has been, I don't know, less than stellar and certainly not reliable.
Stellar. Own goal, I think, is the phrase you're looking for.
Although the big kind of not working at all story in this is Vodafone. They've got no 5G at all, although they were part of one of 2019's other big stories, which is, of course, their TPG merger, which didn't come off. So we're
Mm.
kind of left wondering whether or not Vodafone will announce in 2020 that, hey, yeah, we do 5G now. They were late to 4G as well.
Yeah, I spoke to the big three telcos a month or two ago to try and get all the latest on what they're doing, and voters like, yeah, we'll get back to you. Like, we have plans, we're just not kind of ready to share them. And then you'll kind of have to ask the question with TPG. I know it's a bit of a conspiracy, but you've got to wonder how serious they actually were, and whether they're actually going to pull it off. And they maybe want to blame Huawei for the fact that the deal fell through. But yeah, you got to wonder if it ever would have stacked up.
It did feel like a lot of fluff. But I was going to say on the Vodafone 5G thing, it's going to happen. In many ways, 5G feels rather like 8K this year. It launched, some people had it, but next year it's going to make more of an impact.
So, with 2019 also wrapping up, we're coming into the last 12 months, he says optimistically, getting the aircraft carrier ready of the NBN. Now, obviously, this year we saw quite a few interesting NBN headlines, but the one I want to really hone in on and remind people of was the supposed, maybe proposed, maybe kind of maybe ish Netflix tax.
Yeah, they keep throwing around different business models. And there's just the problem with the NBN is that the numbers don't quite stack up. And partly that's because we didn't end up building the way we thought we were going to build it. So some of the business cases and use cases don't quite stack up. And the way we charge for the NBN and the way we charge for CVC bandwidth is a little bit different to the way the rest of the people do it in the world. So we come up with crazy ideas like Netflix streaming taxes. But yeah, they realized pretty quickly they were shooting themselves in the foot there.
So, towards
A
the end of the year, oh, sorry, Lee, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think a lot of Australians just kind of want a, an NBN that functions the way it says it's going to, that actually hits the peak speeds and doesn't have to worry about, I guess, flaking out at the best of times. Um, I'm not going to say people are going to want to pay the tax. They shouldn't necessarily have to pay a tax just for using the internet, and streaming is a big part of that. But I think at this point, most people would just be happy with, I don't know, internet that works.
Mm.
Shuffling along in the headlines, and I suppose keeping on that theme of things that work or things that actually stopped working, the relationship between Huawei and the United States of America got off to a kind of bumpy start with Huawei launching a lawsuit against the US and the US retaliating by basically saying, you want US tech? You can't have it.
Yeah, that's a mess. And no one can tell me that this thing isn't political. The whole security, I'm sure there are security issues, and it would be naive to think that there aren't security issues around dealing with China. But the fact that Trump was dragging this into the trade negotiations, and as soon as there was some movement in the trade negotiations, he was like, well, maybe we can be a bit flexible about that, tells me that security is not the only thing going on here.
If security were the key part, I would expect to see other names dragged through the mud. I'd expect to
Mm.
see DJI, which does a lot of drones and obviously surveillance equipment. I'd expect to see Lenovo, which I would be surprised not to see its computers using government departments in America. It told you a lot that this was political, because if it was security against all Chinese companies, there would have been a lot more on the blacklist that are fairly famed in Chinese computing.
Mm.
And the impact here did actually cross over multiple areas. We were just chatting kind of TPG Vodafone, and the ACCC tried to argue that TPG would build its mobile network if it was still separate, and TPG very much came out and said, "Look, we can't because we can't build it with Huawei products." So there was that side of it, and then on the other side of it, we fairly recently, in terms of the year's run, got the incredibly neutered Huawei Mate 30 Pro. And Lee, I know you've been giving that one a bit of a run through. I've had my own time with it. It's a great piece of hardware that's almost lobotomized, isn't it?
It's really kind of a shame. I mean, because we've all seen the P30 Pro, and it's a staggering. It still is one of the best cameras you'll find all year. Mate 30 Pro does extend it, but wow, it is such an unusable device, because you go to use it, and of course we all are so reliant on the Google ecosystem here, and the very fact that the Huawei App Gallery only maybe includes one app that you can use, nothing integrates, no services. It's really difficult, even for an experienced phone reviewer, to not go, I'm just going to go and install Google off grid and see what happens. I it's kind of like the perfect example of how dependent Huawei is on Google technologies, and of course, obviously on that relationship with America, because what an exceptional piece of hardware is just beyond useless without it, without the software.
Yeah, I mean, I did the full side load. Well, not the full side load. You can't do the full side load. I did as much of the side load of Google as you can, and you can get some services working, and there are a whole host that you just can't and never will be able to. And there's a whole bunch where I wasn't quite willing to, for example, put my banking information. The thing has NFC, but I wasn't willing to set it up for contactless payments because it's already on a hacked version of Google. There's really no way of knowing what's going on behind the scenes with that. And Huawei sort of tried to sidestep it with all of its talk of Harmony OS, but its story changed on that so much over the year. It kind of started out with, this is Harmony OS. It's all singing, all dancing, everything, TVs to mobiles, everything will run Harmony OS. And then as I chatted to them over the year, it was like, oh no, Harmony OS is sort of a layer on EMUI. Oh, it's sort of what we're looking for in the future. Later in the year, they kind of went out and said, actually, yeah, we're going to be Android open source for our phones for quite some time.
The problem that Huawei has is what I'm calling the giant question mark over its future with Android, which is that in a Western demographic like us in China, this is fine, that doesn't matter. But in a Western demographic like America, Australia, the UK, we're so dependent on this proper integration that not having it, that not being able to connect it, actually seriously dents not just Huawei's use, but its reputation for being a provider of great devices. I had someone ask me today if anything, could beat the Huawei P30 Pro, and I said that the Mate 30 technically beats it, but just like the P30 Pro, there's a giant question mark over its future because you don't know if you're ever going to get Android 10 as an update. You don't know if you're ever going to get anything more. And quite frankly, if the P30 Pro was, for instance, forced to go to whatever is on the Mate 30 Pro, it would cease to be as great a device as it is. It would just be great hardware. You'd be buying a camera with a not quite functional version of Android to do all those great things. And that's not enough because if you're going that route, honestly, you're just going to buy a camera.
Speaking of phones with questionable usability, it was the year of folding phones. The foldable phones didn't quite all go according to plan, though, did it?
No, it did not. So Samsung and Huawei, again, were in a bit of a race to get the Mate X and the Galaxy Fold out the door. Samsung got the Galaxy Fold out the door, but then realized they kind of got it stuck in the door halfway because its US launch was blocked. What? It was like a week before they were actually due to go on sale. They got them out to the usual crew of tech reviewers, and they pretty much all broke them in slightly different ways. And so they went back to the drawing board. And I will give them credit, they did seem to address most of the big problems. I had one in for review, and they did. I was not happy at the time. This is on public record. They did have very weird, very stringent review guidelines and timings around it, and I
One
protested
week
at them.
for everyone.
Well, it wasn't even a week. It was a couple of days. It was not
Yeah.
good. I kind of pointed this out a bit more publicly than I suspect they would have liked. And then, to their credit, they supplied me with a unit for a fortnight, which gave me enough time to properly assess it. I sort of like the Galaxy Fold. I can't entirely recommend too many people buy it because of some of the limitations around it. And I've had a little bit of hands-on time with the Mate X. That's an interesting device, but again, it's got the Huawei question mark you were referring to. We know the Motorola is coming. Lee, do you think foldables are going to go the way of, for example, those 3D screen phones we had about 4 or 5 years ago? Nice idea, nobody does them, or is there a future here?
I've still got one of those 3D screen phones in my drawer. I think the HTC Evo 3D is the only one I remember. Look, I think I don't think foldables will go that way. I think we'll eventually get to the point where foldables will actually become usable. I remember talking to you guys both last year about this, and I think there was this idea that 2019 was going to be the year of the foldable, and obviously a lot of things happened, and it didn't quite work out that way. The only foldable that Australians got to see was the Galaxy Fold, and it's a $3,000 foldable. It's a cool idea. I think, like you, Alex, I liked it more than I expected I would. There's not a lot of use case for me, but I really like what they're trying to do, even though it's a very thick and relatively heavy phone that obviously costs a lot. But I think starting from next year, we're going to see a lot more use case for it. I guess, and it brings me back to the Moto Razr that you're talking about. There is something, I guess, there's a really beautiful approach to this, which we're not seeing from other manufacturers, which is that while the typical approach for foldables seems to be a phone that folds flat into a tablet, Motorola is taking the one that makes sense in my mind, which is a phone that folds into something smaller so you can slip it in your pocket. And it looks like the original Moto Razr phone. And in my mind, that's kind of an approach for foldable that makes sense, because if I want a proper tablet to use, I'll probably turn to a tablet or a laptop. In an age when phones are huge and are seriously making outlines and dents and tearing jeans pockets up, I love the idea of a foldable that folds to something smaller. Battery life is obviously going to be a big question mark with this, and I see that there's an expectation that this will launch early next year, so it's not very far off. But that's kind of the foldable approach I like. I think, like you, when we were talking about this last year, I remember you saying, Alex, that how you see foldables working is how they expand into other areas, like in tablets and laptops. And that's where I think it's going to get really interesting. Moving from a phone to a tablet or a phone to a small pocket-sized phone, that's cool, but there are only so many ways you can do it.
I think that foldable idea down into something smaller is good. The price has got to come down on that. That's got to.
Oh, absolutely.
I reckon that's the budget market, the premium market, and I'm really keen to see where, oddly enough, Microsoft goes with this, because of course they announced their Surface updates that we'll see next year, including their first phone for a whole bunch of years, the Surface Duo, which is an Android.
Because they've had so much luck with phones, haven't they, Sheets?
Does it come with Windows Phone?
So much luck with phones.
I've still got 3 Windows phones. Who wants them?
Oh, yeah, I've got a cupboard full of all that junk.
Phone recycling, sir. Phone recycling. It's a
But
great
that
great
kind
thing.
of proves the point. What they tried to do, it was already too late. It was already iOS or Android, and that was it. And that's the same thing that Huawei's seen. You could actually come out with a better system, a better operating system than iOS and Android today, and you would still go nowhere. It's just too deeply ingrained in people's lives, in people's own tech ecosystems. You can't turn these things around at this point, I don't think. But I really think we are missing the big use case for foldable phones, the one big business case, which is reviving the Nintendo Game & Watch dual screen. I want to play Oil Panic. I want to play Donkey Kong on one of these things. That, to me...
It's all about greenhouse, sir, and you know it.
I forgot about that one.
So Adam, I want you to try the Asus ROG phone, the Republic of Gamers phone, which is somewhere between a Nintendo Switch and a phone. It also is their heaviest phone released this year. It's 240 grams.
It's a bit of a beast, although
that's weirdly, a lot of phone.
Weirdly, with that dual screen thing, I am literally holding in my hand the Nubia Z20, which is a dual screen phone, but unlike, for example, the LG V50 thing or the Samsung Galaxy Fold, this is literally phone screen on the front, phone screen on the back. It's weird. It doesn't always work right.
That's going to be hard to play Oil Panic when you're flipping from side to side, really quickly spinning it around.
Challenge. you need more these days.
You and a friend, it's 2-player. You're on one side, they're on the other.
That's cool. That's kind of like the old table arcades.
Exactly. What I'm really keen to see, I guess, next year as well is more. That's an experimental phone, really. More experiments in it. I think mobiles are so established, and in fact, if you want a mobile, these days basically buy a mid-range phone. Seriously, if you want that flagship, that's great. And there are some advantages in camera and so on. But for most people, for the vast majority of people, budget is where it's at in terms of it'll provide pretty much everything you need. What I think we need in that premium space is more experimental stuff. Some of it's going to fail. Some of it's going to succeed wildly. But unless we get that, if we just get, oh yeah, better camera, maybe a better battery, slightly sharper screen, 2020 is going to be a bit of a yawner for me, I think.
Yeah. But speaking of games and shaking things up, streaming games was a big thing in 2019. How do we think that's going to pan out?
Well,
and subscription games.
Well, I was going to say streaming games. I don't know it's going to pan out in Australia because we had Google Stadia launch, but not here. Not here. No streaming for you. And we've had
I can't hear you. You're breaking up. We're going through the tunnel.
That joke gets less funny every time you do it.
It does.
But keep at it. Eventually, it'll come back around.
Keep plugging away.
But look, Stadia launched. It's not really gone anywhere here. And we've had a few others that people have been able to kind of bounce into. NVIDIA's got their thing and PlayStation has theirs, which never launched here, has existed for a long time. The subscription space is, I think, more interesting because there's just so much more competition there. Whether you're talking mobile with Apple Arcade, with what Microsoft's doing with Game Pass, it's looking like a kind of brutal market, and it's going to. I think it's already has changed that conception around game ownership. I'm someone who loves owning a collection of games. I've come to accept that this is me.
Oh my god,
and this
you
is
have
what
a
I do.
collection.
I've got a good game or
Collection
two.
is not the word for it. Collection doesn't
You
even
ha-
start to
Fine,
explain his lounge room.
Alex has a museum. That's what he has.
Yes, a museum.
Look, we've had Alex Boz from Oz Retro Gamer. His collection would put mine to shame. I'm not the worst, but I am a dinosaur in this, and I recognise this. There's an awful lot of people
No,
for whom the concept.
I've been to both your houses, and yours looks like a museum. Yours looks like a museum that you just let your family live in. I'm sorry, Alex Boz, but Alex Kidman has the upper hand on you when it comes to the amount of stuff.
He also has a lot of Fraggle Rock, and this is a good thing.
Look, if you've got something nasty to say about Fraggle Rock, I'll see you outside, sir. But getting
you got a
back
problem with
onto
Fraggle Rock. You got a problem with me. Yeah.
yeah. Gobo for life, sir. Gobo for life. But getting back to the point, and
There was one.
there was one. Clearly, a lot of people are very keen on this idea of the Netflixing of games, of paying a sum of money and saying, right, I can just play this stuff for as long as I want to. I'm not fussed if I don't have it later on. I wonder down the track whether or not they'll hit that Netflix effect, though, where they go, oh, hang on, what about that game? And they go back to have a look at it and realize it's not there anymore
It's not
because
there.
the
Yeah.
licensing ran out or the money ran out or whatever. I wonder if that might not see a backlash, but we'll have to wait and see. It's certainly become a very, very big thing, as has, of course, streaming services in general, because, of course, Netflix, whilst it dominated and quite recently at least released figures for Asia Pacific that showed it's got a huge market share, although it seems to be slowing, had to take on, well, Disney Plus in a much bigger way.
Baby Yoda. I'm winning. I've said it
Baby
once.
And Apple TV Plus in a we have no content way.
I mean, look, it has content. It just doesn't have much content. Look, if you buy an Apple
Snoopy in
device,
space.
It's
Snoopy in
not
space
Baby
is there.
Yoda.
that's true. If you buy an Apple device, you kind of get it free, or for the first year. So that's at least paid off. But Disney Plus is where it's at. That is the major competitor, and obviously Marvel, Fox, Star Wars, Disney, Pixar, all of that really comes together in such a great way. But I mean, how do you compete against the juggernaut that is Disney?
You offer stuff that Disney Plus isn't. I mean, and I'd certainly encourage anyone listening, go back and listen to the chat we had with Steve Malk about content on Disney Plus and where it's not hitting the target. You do
It's
the
too
stuff that
family
they're not.
friendly.
You know,
Yeah,
I don't.
It's too family friendly.
We'll never see a BoJack Horseman equivalent on Disney
No.
Plus.
Absolutely not. Yeah. They won't show Deadpool even though it's a Marvel movie. I was surprised. I thought because originally X-Men wasn't on as well, and there was thought that maybe the X-Men was a little bit too grown up for Disney, but they just held it back. They put it online December now. But I think they're gonna feel the pain because Baby Yoda wraps up on the 28th, I want to say, which means for a lot of people, if you sign up, got the 7-day trial, you're just ticking over into your third month or something like that. So they're going to get another $8 out of my house because I haven't been that impressed with Baby Yoda, but I've got to know how it finishes.
There's still about
that, I
15
don't
Baby Yodas behind me from the previous episode, by the way.
Yeah, true.
So keep going.
But
Keep
I'm
going.
working on it. I'm working on it. We'll have a count back.
See,
But,
I'm not as much.
I'm
a
not
fan
giving
as,
him my money after. As soon as Baby Yoda wraps up, there's not enough in there to give him my money.
See, I'm not as much a fan as The Mandalorian as I expected I would be, but I think for a lot of families, the win is obviously the fact that it's all Disney or Pixar, and that's
Yeah.
a critical one because if you have kids, you're probably
Well-
going to watch Moana and Frozen.
Yeah, no, it's
40
not if you have
times this
kids.
week
If
alone.
if you have young kids, see that's
Totally.
the difference. Alex and I, our children are older than yours. Our children are teenagers. You've got a 2, 3-year-old.
Two.
I'm losing
I've
track.
watched
Two.
I've watched the Frozen Christmas special 12 times this week alone. I know
So-
it back to front.
In your house, a Disney subscription makes a lot more sense than
Absolutely.
in our house. Even though we all have kids, it's still that 10-year age difference makes a huge difference as to whether Disney or Netflix or something else offers better value for money for your household.
It's now the time to admit that I've actually got an annual Disney Plus sub.
You
I
just you all Baby Yoda all the time.
All Baby Yoda all the time because honestly, my wife is a huge Disney fan and she looked at the catalog and said, I want
Yep.
this. And it's like, okay, fair enough. She puts
But-
up with me buying the occasional game here or there, one or two, not many.
Occasionally.
So
Look-
I had to let her have that one.
And look, I'm a huge Disney fan myself, and looking at the catalog, there are aspects of it that actually aren't entirely complete. Like I look at it and go, there are things missing. There are titles that even my daughter liked to watch before that were on stand that are missing in action as well. But if you are a Disney fan, it's hard to go past it, and there aren't many services that I've seen that offer that annual subscription with a bit of a discount, and that's something kind of Disney Plus has now. That being said, I am half expecting next year the prices to rise dramatically, because once they've hooked you, they've hooked you.
Well, they've got to play that careful game, though, because they are up against Netflix most dominantly, locally because of Stan, and to a certain extent Amazon Prime and Apple, and they're putting a lot of their money into this. They're risking a lot of their property and a lot of the ways that they could monetize it. And of course, Disney is all about the money, but that limited scope does make it. I think it will make it a little bit tougher. I mean, if they drop off $1 Million Duck or the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, almost nobody was going to notice, and an awful lot of people probably never realized those
Darby
are actual
O'Gill
movies.
and the Little People.
Exactly, those are actual movies that are on Disney Plus
I
right
watched
now.
them when I was a kid.
But as soon as if they drop or decide to vault, the Marvel movies or Baby Yoda, for example, they'll see their numbers tumble, and it is all about keeping that growth up. As I said, Netflix just recently broke out a lot of its stats around subscriber numbers, including Asia Pacific, and unfortunately, Asia Pacific is huge. It's not just Australia and New Zealand as it sometimes is in some of these figures. So we can't draw straight Australian numbers, but Netflix is definitely hitting a bit of a plateau in terms of the number of people who are actually willing to stay subscribed to it. You're always going to have churn. It's what Foxtel hit years and years and years ago. And Disney, I think, will have a bit of time before it maybe hits that, but it's going to need a lot of that unique draw-in kind of content to do it. So one of the other big trends, one of the other big discussion points of 2019 was around privacy and security, and especially around the big privacy giants, Facebook and Google. And we had the ACCC Digital Platforms Report, which looked into it. Facebook started talking about more open data, and we had an episode where we talked about transferring your photos onto Google Photos, things like that. But all of this, of course, theoretically will come into fruition in 2020 and beyond. Is anything really going to change in 2020, or have we all just signed up for this idea that they can peer into our lives forever?
I think your average punter is just going along with it. I think it's only people like us that are really making a fuss about it, and everyone else thinks, oh, yeah, it's a hassle, but I don't want to give up Facebook, and because that's how I talk to my mum, and I see what my cousin's doing. He lives in London, and they'll just kind of amble along.
I've had a few people ask me about it, but majority of people seem willing to accept Facebook, Google, Amazon. I remember talking with Dr. Carl about it actually, and he seemed more likely to, I guess, turn off the microphones in the speaker. And each to their own, you know. Everyone's got that. Majority of people I speak to seem to be more concerned that one of the ones I heard this year was that, is your Huawei phone going to listen to me? And I wasn't quite sure how to respond to that. I think in this day and age, we just kind of accept it. I don't know if that's a good thing. I'm fairly sure it's not, but it's just kind of become what we do.
I do a lot of radio, and often when these kind of stories have come up, and I've pointed out things like, well, when you use Google Maps, you're giving them a map of where you've gone, and you can go and look that up. People do this, and they are shocked. They are genuinely surprised. You're right. Most people don't necessarily care until they think about it. And as soon as they think about it, it's like, whoa, I really don't like that. I'm really not comfortable with that. And I'd hope, actually, that we see a more... what's the best way to put this? A more constrained approach from those big companies, along with a sensible legislative approach. And it's tough. It's not an easy one to solve. So, folks, that wraps up yet another episode and another whole year of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Lee for joining us for the show. Now, if folks other than myself want to find you and your work online, where can they do that?
You can find me at therap.com.au or at @Lilo on Twitter.
And of course, you can catch up with us on Twitter at VerticalHoldAU or via the Vertical Hold Facebook page. And I should, of course, thank all of the other Aussie tech journos who've joined us throughout this year. The show wouldn't be what it was without all of you.
Thanks also to the listeners for giving us another great year. Thanks for all your reviews, your feedback, your shout outs. We're taking a short break for a couple of weeks, but we'll be back in January with a great show on the big Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Have a great Christmas. Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by Casa Systems, taking Australian technology to the global market.
Last Christmas,
Christmas,
I gave you my
you
heart.
my heart.